Okay, welcome to the City of Santa Barbara's Harbor Commission regular meeting for November 21st, 2024. I'm Adam Stanowak, Chair, and tonight we have a pretty packed meeting. I believe we have all the departments presenting, and let's start with a roll call, please.
Commissioner Anderson is absent. Commissioner Cohen?
Here.
Commissioner Ford?
Here.
Commissioner McCrae and Commissioner Nelson are both absent. Commissioner Stedman?
Here.
And Chair Stanowak.
Here. Thank you. Director Wilshire, do we have any changes to the agenda this evening?
Chair Stanowak, no, we're good to go.
Great, thank you.
On to.
Oh, actually, I think we have general public comments.
Yeah. You asked.
Yeah, you want me to do it? Yeah, okay, so now we're going to move on to general public comment. I believe we have one speaker slip submitted, right?
Yes, we have one speaker slip, John Payne.
Great.
Good evening. I'm John Payne, and I'm the proud owner of Ocean Air Electronics and Yacht Rigging. Been serving the Santa Barbara Harbor since the early 70s. Thank goodness not all under my ownership, although some days it kind of feels like it. But I'm just here to kind of reintroduce myself to you guys. I've also raised a couple kids in the harbor, owned a lot of boats and lived aboard boats and things, and my son's finally in college. So I have a little bit more free time, and I work really hard with the department on the Harbor Festival this year and every year since it really got going. We work on yachts up to 200 feet down to 10 foot. We're doing a Duffy right now. We work for a lot of commercial fishermen. Tomorrow we're hosting our annual Harbor Workers Thanksgiving celebration, really honoring the hardest workers that do all the underwater work, and it's kind of the one day a year where we collect all the companies together that are sometimes competitors, and we become friendly and have a good time. And I'm just here really to say thanks for being able to be part of this cool community and doing the work that we do, and look forward to hopefully seeing more of you guys.
Great, thanks, Mr. Payne.
Chair Stanowak, we do have one hand raised as well.
Sure.
Harrison Hale, you are unmuted and can go ahead.
Great, thanks.
Hello, council members. I wanted to speak to the draft insurance requirement. And what I wanted to say about that is that it took me a long time to get insurance. I've owned my boat for about 4 years and been living aboard for about 3.5. And the boat that I bought is in great condition, but it's a 1978 boat. It's over 40 years old, and so I had a devil of a time getting insurance. It may have taken me 12 months of diligent effort to find an insurance broker and an insurance company that would insure a vessel that was over 40 years of age. And so I think that it's reasonable to require insurance for vessels in the harbor. I have two concerns. One is that I think that once this goes into effect, if you can't provide evidence of insurance within 30 days, then there's some repercussions. You may give up your slip rights, and so I think that needs to be a lot longer. I mean, ideally it'd be 12 months. Short of that, maybe 6 months would work. But the insurance industry as a whole is in great disarray. Many companies will not insure homeowners in the state of California, and fortunately, there's an option for homeowners. They can go to the state, and the state will insure them. But boat owners don't have those kinds of resources available. And so we need more time to get insurance policies, to seek them out, to find insurance companies. A lot of times, the insurance broker told me that the insurance companies are so slow at getting back to them that 30 days is just not enough, even when the boat owner is acting in good faith and diligently to get an insurance policy. The other thing that I might suggest is that I don't know if the $500,000 is maybe overkill. I have $300,000 of liability insurance for my boat, and so I don't know if I could get $500,000 of liability insurance, and I think that might be difficult for either the little guys in the harbor or those like me who have older vessels. So I would just ask the Harbor Commission to consider whether they might be willing to lower the minimum amount of coverage. I think it's great that comprehensive coverage isn't required because I have been unable to get an insurance company to issue a policy for that type of coverage, but liability coverage is reasonable. Just ask that you might consider a lower amount, and also just to reiterate, a longer period of time to get insurance. I appreciate the long runway we have before this ordinance goes into effect. People like me in the harbor would have 2 years, and that's good. But after it goes into effect, those who buy a new boat might have difficulty getting insurance. It might take some time. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. Do we have any other general public comment in the queue?
There are no other hands raised and no speaker slips submitted.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so we'll go on to work group reports. I do have a short strategic planning work group report, but are there any other reports among my colleagues here? And no. So regarding the strategic planning work group, the work group, first of all, was really gratified that the Harbor Commission voted to approve our recommendation at the last meeting for the process and the next steps for strategic planning. We met again on Friday, November 15th, just last Friday. I also talked with Director Wiltshire the day before to discuss the next steps. And since we all agreed that an important first step is that everyone get on the same page regarding legal policies for the harbor, as well as existing documentation and goals and objectives, we'll just begin working with the waterfront staff on the proposed dashboard. And if you remember, the dashboard is kind of like a placemat that we would have in front of us, each on the dais for us to refer to. It would include summaries and pertinent related information. So we're excited to be gathering more information on how to do that and what should be included. We're also looking at other harbor commissions that might be good references for us in terms of information. We're very interested in doing a minimal amount of reinventing the wheel. And we also discussed the possibility of including a code of ethics creation for us that might be included on the agenda for the January priority setting meeting. And Chair Stanwyck and Director Wiltshire will discuss this further in the coming weeks. And as we're ending this year, I just want to say many thanks again to my partners in this endeavor, Commissioners Stedman and Nelson, for their great input and their work. And that's it.
Consent. We can move on to the consent calendar.
Item 1, approval of the minutes. Recommendation that Harbor Commission waive further reading and approve the minutes from the regular meeting of October 17th, 2024.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
Motion to approve?
Second.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Mr. Lopez, can you please do a vote?
Yes, this is a motion by Commissioner Stedman, seconded by Vice Chair Ford, to approve the consent calendar. Commissioner Anderson is absent. Commissioner Cohen?
Yes.
Commissioner Ford?
Yes.
Commissioner McCray and Nelson are absent. Commissioner Stedman?
Yes.
Chair Stanwyck?
Yes.
And that passes unanimously with Commissioners Anderson, McCray, and Nelson absent.
Great, thank you. Okay, we can move on to new business. And item number 2, sea level rise adaptation plan update. Mr. Lopez, can you read that item and the recommendation, please?
Yes, this is item 2, Sea Level Rise Adaptation Plan Update. Recommendation that Harbor Commission receive a presentation from the City of Santa Barbara Sustainability and Resilience Department, providing an update on the city's sea level rise adaptation plan.
Great, thank you, and welcome.
Chair and Commissioners, I just wanted to introduce Melissa Hetrick and Timmy Bolton and thank them for coming tonight. They're with our Sustainability and Resiliency Department with the city, so they're going to provide a much asked for update on the 30-year sea level rise adaptation plan for the waterfront. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be in front of your commission. As Mike said, I'm Timmy Bolton. I'm a climate adaptation analyst within the Sustainability and Resilience Department and joined here tonight by Melissa Hetrick, who is our Resilience Program Supervisor. Ms. Hetrick will kick off the presentation tonight with an overview of what our team does and what we're up to in the Adaptation and Resilience Program. I'll then give an overview of our recently launched 30-year waterfront adaptation plan and its associated work program, and then we'll conclude with a question and answer period. And I'll now pass it to Ms. Hetrick to give the program overview.
Okay, good evening. Let's see. So it's been a while since we've been here. So for those of you that aren't aware, about 3 years ago, the city started a new department called the Sustainability and Resilience Department. And at the same time, we created a climate adaptation and resilience program. And what that program does is essentially get the city ready for climate changes, sea level rise, increased rainfall, increased flooding, wildfire. We also help with funding for FEMA funding and state funding for adaptation projects. And we really work across all the departments, so working on all of our infrastructure and adapting our infrastructure and reaching out to our community to be resilient. Next slide. So as some of you may recall, in 2021, the city approved its first sea level rise adaptation plan. And that the process of developing that plan included a team of consultants, an interdepartmental team, and then a sea level rise subcommittee. The Harbor Commission had 2 representatives on that subcommittee, in addition to Parks and Rec Commission, Council, Water Commission, and Planning Commission. And coming out of that plan came a number of things, including guiding principles for adaptation, which really are guiding all of our adaptation projects, including the one that you'll hear about today on the waterfront. And those include things like we should be prioritizing health and safety, we should be prioritizing projects with co-benefits and that benefit multiple parts of our community, not just small parts. The sea level rise adaptation plan sets forth the city on a phased adaptation planning approach, meaning that we'll be closely monitoring changing conditions and then taking certain actions when certain triggers or thresholds are reached. It outlines very specific near-term actions that the city should take and then prioritizes those actions. The majority of the highest priority actions involve assets on our waterfront. And then it has a decision structure for mid and long-term amounts of sea level rise. And so since 2021, we've been successful at getting over $5 million in grant funds from the state for implementation projects, including the waterfront plan. Next slide. So these are our biggest active projects right now, and I just wanted to quickly go through them so you can see how they relate to the waterfront adaptation plan. We're working with Beacon to develop a regional coastal adaptation monitoring program, and this is really looking at what is the information that we need to monitor changing conditions so that managers of our coast can make adaptation decisions. And we should have a draft of that plan out at the beginning of next year. We're also working on a wastewater and water systems climate adaptation plan. This is looking at not just sea level rise, but also increased flooding that we're seeing because of higher intensity rainfall amounts, as we saw in the last 2 years. And it really has a strong focus on the wastewater collection system and El Estero, a water treatment plant. And a draft of that report will be released in around the February timeframe next year. And then we have an airport climate adaptation plan also going on, along with a drainage master plan, and that feeds into the overall airport's planning efforts. We are just launching development of a model of our stormwater system to look at capacity improvements that we could be doing to relieve some of the flooding we're seeing with some of these lower level rainfall events. And then, of course, the 30-year waterfront plan that Mr. Bolton will tell you about. Next slide. Oh. So just with that, before I hand it over to Mr. Bolton, one of our goals in all of our projects is really to tee up actionable projects that we can then seek funding for implementation for. So FEMA funding, Army Corps, and the vast amount of state funding that's come out. In particular, right now, we really have our eye on Proposition 4, the climate bond. Those funds will be released starting July 1st and will be available for many years. And so we're really wanting to tee up our projects to be able to apply for those resiliency funds. So I'll hand it back over to Mr. Bolton.
All right, thank you, Ms. Hetrick. So at the highest level, our vision for the 30-year waterfront adaptation plan is to develop a practical plan that prepares the Santa Barbara waterfront for increased storm surges, erosion, and flooding by providing solutions that preserve and enhance recreation, commerce, beach access, habitat, and critical infrastructure for the near term and future generations. The scope of this project is the waterfront area, the low-lying area that spans between Ledbetter Beach and the Clark Estate. As you in this room know, the waterfront is a magnetic destination and central element of Santa Barbara's identity. It includes 3 miles of sandy beaches, well-managed open space and park areas, extensive recreational opportunities, Stearns Wharf, the harbor commercial area, the multi-use beachway, as well as other cherished resources. And it's a unique section of coastline for a lot of reasons, including that it's publicly owned and managed, which both creates unique opportunities for resilience measures and also posits challenges to our operations and management as that government agency. The fundamental need for this project is centered around coastal hazards. We're experiencing impacts during storms today, and the frequency, severity, and intensity of those impacts will only increase as sea level rise, so we have to do something. This work effort also directly implements several of the 2021 Sea Level Rise Adaptation Plan that Ms. Hetrick mentioned, its high priority items, including developing a near-term strategy and improving the harbor's resilience. It also provides critical analysis required for coastal permitting, which will streamline future permit review for some of those follow-on projects that Ms. Hetrick referenced. And it will also provide a funding benefit to all of this. By doing this work effort, we'll get additional points for FEMA funding. It'll set us up well for potentially getting monies from that climate bond, as well as other state funding opportunities. So this graphic here is just giving you a sense of what it means when we're talking about coastal hazard impacts. This includes things that range from things like bank erosion to structure damage, sedimentation and flooding. And these are all things that we've experienced in recent times, especially with some of those winter storms over the last couple of years. So the first reason we landed on 30 years as the focus for this near-term strategy and this work effort is that the sea level rise projections and the science behind it, it's a lot more certain. So the graph on the right on this slide, this is provided by the state's Ocean Protection Council, and they're the effective authority for the work that we do as it relates to sea level rise science, how we as a government agency should be planning, and how permitting works in our area. And so the orange arrow is more or less the time frame we're talking about and the sea level rise amounts we're talking about. And as we see, nobody has a crystal ball of what the future will truly hold, and so naturally there's a lot more consistency in that near-term time frame. There's a whole lot more variation and uncertainty in that long-term time frame. So a key to all of this too is within that range, the sea level rise amounts we're talking about, it's at a level that we have a lot of options. There's a lot of things we can do to respond and adapt to that, and it's before it requires some of the large-scale flood control measures that would be required at the end of this century and certainly by the middle of the next one. So these maps here were taken from that 2021 Sea Level Rise Adaptation Plan and just dig in a little more into that concept. So what we're focused on more or less is the map on the left of the slide, which is about 2.5 feet of sea level rise. The science has changed a little bit, so these maps are a little out of date. But the premise here is simply that the time frame and the scope of this project, we're focused on when our risk as it relates to coastal hazards is primarily on the beach side of Cabrillo Boulevard or just up to that. And so really we're planning for this type of paradigm, but with an eye for what is anticipated to happen by the end and middle of next century, which is shown on the right, when some of those more large-scale flood control measures would be required. And one of the things I want to highlight too from the 2021 plan is one of the key findings is that over time we're going to lose access to the beaches that are below the mesa and the bluff-backed areas. And so it's critical that we, at least as long as we can, maintain as much of the sandy beach access in this low-lying area because we're going to lose a lot of the access over time. As we modeled with the map on the left in that paradigm, we've lost about 80% of that access. So in the time period we're talking about, it's imperative that we maintain that core function. So shifting now into the work program, how we're going to go about doing this work effort. We're fortunate to have an extremely strong project team engaged in this effort. We have exemplary staff supporting and guiding this throughout the city organization. We have a core team who meets with Melissa and myself, comprised of the Waterfront Department, Parks and Rec Department, and Public Works. We meet on a bi-weekly basis with the consultant team, working through all the nitty-gritty and guiding this effort. And then we have an outer advisory team comprised of all the departments and work groups listed on the left of this slide, providing input at key junctures and key decision points, making sure we're on the right track. And we're fortunate to have an accomplished consulting team supporting this work effort with a deep deck and local presence, headed by Stantec and supported by Bionic, ESA, Coastal Restoration Consultants, and Summit Environmental Group. The key elements of this work effort are listed here, which includes first and foremost doing updated modeling to fill in some of those missing gaps and give us a better idea of what the risks are in this time frame. A companion piece of this is doing a high-level analysis of the harbor breakwater and groin system to see if those elements should be raised or modified. This will all then build into a comprehensive near-term adaptation strategy with steps of what to do next and what to do at defined tipping points. And really with this effort, relating to the themes that Ms. Hetrick mentioned earlier, we're really trying to move the needle beyond just another planning exercise to one that actually leads to on-the-ground changes. So we've scoped in conceptual drawings for targeted adaptation measures, including doing 30% drawings to close the missing link on the beachway, as well as doing improvements for known issues in the harbor commercial area. The idea is that after we complete this project, we'll immediately go into permitting, final design, and construction for the things that come out of this, including those two high-priority elements. And of course, throughout all of this process, we want to hear from the community. We have a robust community engagement plan for this that I'll go into a little later that will be conducted in both English and Spanish. And ultimately, our goal for this is a 30-year waterfront adaptation plan that is actionable, adoptable, permittable, and inspirational, and that it makes our waterfront even more spectacular than it is today. So diving in a little more to the updated modeling, in the past we've relied heavily on the USGS's Cosmos system. It's a really awesome tool that maps coastal hazards and sea level rise throughout the entire state, and it's been foundational in getting our community to where we are today as it relates to sea level rise and adaptation planning. But there are some known limitations to this, as is bound to happen when you're doing something on the statewide level. And so one of the things that we're going to do is address some of those known things to get a more accurate picture of what our risk truly is in these areas. And we're also going to incorporate into all of this updated data, updated sea level rise requirements from the state, and get a better understanding of how sediment moves in and around our project area to look at the role of dredging, berms, and those types of management decisions. As we work on developing the adaptation options, we're looking at the full suite of things. As I mentioned earlier, we really truly have a lot of options in the time frame and the amount of sea level rise we're looking at. So we're looking at everything from sort of the traditional engineered concrete-based, seawall type systems to things that are truly green and natural as they relate to, doing dune restoration, marshes, those types of things, and everything creative in between. I do want to note that while the harbor is a fairly unique use case, in general, our permitting agencies and our funding partners heavily prefer doing nature-based solutions whenever possible, so that's something we're certainly going to keep front in mind as we work towards selecting and developing adaptation outcomes. And I also want to point out that while we're looking at the entire waterfront area, there's certainly some specific areas that will have different levels of analyses. And so as I alluded to, we're going to have a heightened level of analysis as it relates to the harbor commercial area, working on addressing some of the known issues there that relate to flooding and erosion, as well as the Harbor West area. And then we're also going to be looking at how we can make the beachway and all of that and the missing link safer. Hopefully you can see my mouse, but as I'm sure you're all aware, there's a fairly defined facility for bikes and whatnot until about here, and then you end up in a parking lot before you end up back over here. So one of the things we're looking at is how we can make it safer for all users, how can we address the various trade-offs and preferences, and hopefully do things in a way that has mutual benefits. So perhaps there's an opportunity to do something like close that missing link while providing a resilience measure that reduces the amount of erosion and flooding in that parking lot. So those are the types of symbiotic solutions we're looking for as we start working through this process. I do want to highlight, though, that in the context of trade-offs, we do have finite space, and there is a likely scenario where we're going to have to reconfigure some of the parking in the Harbor West and Ledbetter parking lots. We know how critical it is for public access and harbor function, so we're certainly going to do whatever we can to make as much of that parking as possible. So as we go about developing these adaptation alternatives, this slide shows kind of the high-level process about this. We're using that 2021 plan as the foundational elements to guide these decisions. We're going to take that modeling and start with about a handful of options, run it through the city process and get internal input through stakeholders, whittle that down to a couple, and then package that up to present to the community for input. And on the topic of input, for community engagement, city staff will be leading that effort. We're fortunate to have a really strong community engagement team within sustainability and resilience. We'll be supported by the Stantec team, who will help us provide certain materials, directions, and input on that process. And we're super fortunate to be partnering with the Promotores Network to get a much more robust engagement within the Spanish-speaking community. We're really trying to focus equity and balanced engagement throughout this entire process, so we're really looking forward to doing that. We are underway on some of the initial tasks as they relate to community engagement. First, establishing the goals and objectives of what we're truly trying to accomplish. How do we reach the right people? Who are those right people? And then shortly we'll begin some informational interviews just to get some super initial sentiments about what's working, what's not, what can we improve, what are the priorities, but also trying to figure out who the right people are to expand our capacity and engagement throughout this process. What are the right networks we can leverage to get, truly meaningful engagement in this process. After that, we'll work on establishing the phasing and timing for the broader engagement, and that will ultimately lead then to the complete engagement plan. In terms of approaches to the engagement, fundamentally, our philosophy is the first bullet point. We're trying to meet people where they are, both from a capacity and time standpoint, but also from a location standpoint. We're going to be doing everything from pop-up interviews in and around the waterfront area to hosting open houses. We'll have handouts and posters. We're going to do an online component to all of this with digital maps and renderings about what the future might look like. There'll be a community survey later in this process. We plan to have community meetings, including joining existing meetings and existing structures with trusted institutions, and there will certainly be a series of roadshows throughout this going in front of boards and commissions like this one. So how does this all come together? I realize that was a lot to spit at you. So we kicked off this project in September with the consultant team and internal team, and really been working on that initial coordination, consultation, getting the data together for this initial work effort. The modeling and risk assessment from our Stantec team is just launching right now and will feed into this overall risk assessment update that will be a primary focus for them for the first half of next year. In parallel with this, we've been working on developing the outreach plan with the internal team and Stantec team, and have begun doing some initial engagement. Things like this, where we're just trying to promote some general awareness that we're doing this project. More is to come, and we would love to hear from you. That will shift a bit to an education campaign as we start to get more of the information from this modeling effort. And then after that phase, we'll shift into a so-called early engagement phase, where we'll focus on getting community input about sentiments, preferences, trade-offs, those types of things, which will then feed into the adaptation options and which ones we ultimately select and recommend. After we have that kind of comprehensive recommendation, we'll have another engagement touch point that will include review of those different options. which will then feed into the various versions of the draft plan, starting with an admin draft, then having a public review draft, leading ultimately to a final plan, and if all goes according to plan, council consideration at the end of 2026. So how do y'all fit into all of this? So we're grateful to be in front of you today, and hopeful that with your continued involvement and input as we go along in this process. Specifically, we're hoping to get from you guys review of major deliverables, so when we get updated modeling, when we have draft materials, we're hoping that you're willing to help guide our adaptation strategy development, make sure we're weighing the right things and considering the right things, that you'll be willing to help support our community engagement processes by both attending our events as well as, pushing out the materials to your networks to really expand our reach and engagement. And then ultimately, we will be returning to you before we go to council for a recommendation on the complete plan, hopefully a positive one. And with that, we are here for your questions. Thank you for your time tonight.
Great, thank you. Do we have any questions? Yep, Commissioner Sedman?
Yes, thank you very much, Melissa and Timothy. You showed a graphic of the different teams that you're going to be interfacing with and engaging with. Why isn't airport on there?
For this work, thank you for the question, through the chair. For this work effort, we are only looking at the waterfront area between Ledbetter and the Clark Estate. So it's not as relevant for the airport in this one. And they're separately working on their own climate adaptation plan that includes sea level rise and fluvial flooding and some other things. So that's the reason why.
And then a second question, you made a remark about FEMA points. What are those?
I was just going to mention that aside from this project, we do just have a climate adaptation interdepartmental team that brings together all of our projects, and that includes members of the airport and the waterfront. And anyway, so we are coordinating still with the the airport. When you're applying for FEMA hazard mitigation funding, or what's called BRIC funding for mitigation projects, there's certain points, and you can score higher if you have your project in a hazard mitigation plan, or if your project serves underserved communities and things like that. And so FEMA has built into their matrix that it addresses climate change as a high priority, and added a lot of points for that. But in addition, if it supports certain public access or public benefits, or is nature-based, there's also additional points. So it just makes it easier to score high for FEMA projects.
Thanks.
Yep, Vice Chair Ford?
Thanks a lot. You've been at this work for how long?
Let's see. I have to think about that. Probably since 2012.
The Sustainability and Resilience,
Oh, for sea
Team?
level rise?
yes?
Oh, the Sustainability and Resilience Department was formed about 3 years ago.
That's what I was thinking. So
Yeah.
I'm kind of interested in knowing what have been some of your most challenging and interesting challenges in the work so far. And have you found yourself changing priorities, or I saw the list of the active projects and wonder if they all have equal value, or are they prioritized too?
So what's interesting is when the sea level rise subcommittee met, we met a lot. That subcommittee met a lot and really had a lot of discussions about how to set up the program that have been really foundational. And the guiding principles, I do think those were very important because they really set up how we're going to prioritize our projects. And so we're really at this point implementing all the highest priorities that were in that plan. They were the very highest priorities, I guess I should say. And so to me, they have equal weight because they all involve critical infrastructure and basic needs of the city. And so, right, from my perspective, they're being treated equally. I think the hardest part I've encountered is prioritization, because there's going to be limited funds out there, and we're not going to be able to address everything at once. And in this work, it's really, you have to look at it in a phased approach. If you try to take on 10 feet of sea level rise right now, it's yeah. It's just also not practical or needed at this time. And getting used to that phased approach is really something that, and really watching what's happening and focusing on the near term instead of looking too far, like keeping our eye on the prize, but not getting so down in the weeds in the long term, really helps getting things moving. That I think that's been the biggest lesson learned, because otherwise it gets overwhelming.
Right, and
Yeah.
how big is your team?
Right now, it's just the two of us.
It's the two of you?
Yeah,
Okay.
but we are looking to expand.
Oh, there you go. Thanks for the report.
Great, any other questions? Do we have any public comment on this item?
There are no hands raised or speaker slips submitted.
Okay, great. Well, thank you again for coming in presentation. Yeah, we appreciate it. Ms. Hendrick, Mr. Bolton, thank you. Okay, we can move on to item number 3 of new business, the vessel insurance policy. Mr. Lopez, can you please read that item for us?
Yes, this is item 3, implementation of vessel insurance policy for vessels in Santa Barbara Harbor, anchorages, and mooring field. Recommendation that Harbor Commission receive a presentation from staff outlining a draft policy for implementing vessel insurance in Santa Barbara waters. Discuss, comment, and provide direction on preferred implementation timeline.
All right, good evening, Chair Stanwyck, Harbor Commissioners, and members of the public. I'm Harbor Operations Manager Nathan Aldridge, and tonight I will be introducing a vessel insurance draft policy based on several months of staff work, Harbor Commission feedback, and public input. So the first order is a bit of a brief timeline looking back the last several years. Starting in May of 2022, the Harbor Commission, before my time, received a report on vessel insurance. A motion was made to direct staff to look further into a vessel insurance requirement. A potential vessel insurance requirement generated multiple letters of support from the public at this time. And fast forward to spring of this past year, 2024, the Harbor Commission received an updated report on vessel insurance. It provided information and specifics of other harbors in California, and a motion was made for staff to look into creating a vessel insurance policy. The following month in May, staff began work on drafting such an insurance policy. And that same month, the Waterfront Department created vessel insurance surveys to gather public input on this. In August of this year, the Harbor Commission received an update on this vessel insurance policy effort and detailing results of the survey we generated. And as a reminder to the Commission, of the 30 marinas surveyed, only 4 did not require vessel insurance at that time. And as a summary, over 83% of the 300+ respondents already have vessel insurance. A majority were in favor of making insurance a requirement, and a majority were also in favor of making this a requirement that applies to all vessels in all areas of the Harbor District. Recently in September, staff engaged the City Attorney's Office for a legal review of draft policy provisions, and in November, a vessel insurance policy draft was developed for Harbor Commission review. So a brief review of the benefits of vessel insurance. Number one, it brings our harbor and our city waters up to current industry standards. It protects vessel owners from out-of-pocket costs due to unforeseen emergencies, and it financially protects the Waterfront Department from costs associated with boat fires, vessel accidents, and expensive vessel cleanup costs. It's important to remember that a majority of boat owners already have insurance, and a majority support a requirement. And currently, the waterfront's operating budget, which falls on slip permittees, ends up paying for disposal costs associated with grounded vessels or any environmental cleanup that exceed our state grant that we get on a 2-year basis from the Department of Boating and Waterways. And unfortunately, the Harbors and Waterways Revolving Fund, which manages that SAVE grant, could be facing insolvency, from what I hear through our partner harbor masters. And the SAVE grant reimbursements could possibly be in jeopardy moving forward into the future. So this is a copy of the vessel insurance policy draft that is part of your packet this evening. I won't go through it in its entirety, but if you haven't already read through the draft, I'll provide the main points of the policy on the next slide. So once again, the draft of the vessel insurance policy is attached, and some highlights of this policy include a $500,000 general liability policy with the city listed as additionally insured. By January 1st, 2026, all vessels in the anchorage and the moorings will need to provide proof of vessel insurance. And then the following year, which is 2 years from now, January 1st, 2027, all remaining vessels in the harbor district will be required to provide proof of vessel insurance. And for vessels not subject to this policy, permitted vessels that are on the beach, so that's Cat Beach, the outriggers and kayaks on West Beach, human-powered vessels, stand-up paddleboards, kayaks, and skiffs that are 15 feet or less. They're subject to our skiff row policy. So this would apply to all vessels that are berthed, docked, moored, or anchored in the harbor district. And as written, this policy would go into effect January 1st of 2025. But that would give all uninsured or anchored or moored vessels a grace period for a full year to come into compliance. And additionally, it would give all remaining uninsured vessels in the harbor district 2 full years to come into compliance, which staff feels is more than a generous timeline. So to close, the talk of implementing a vessel insurance policy has been a topic of conversation for years. There's support from the public, from the Harbor Commission, and the Waterfront Department to move forward. And our recommendation for you this evening is that Harbor Commission discuss, comment, and provide direction on the preferred implementation timeline of a vessel insurance policy. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions from the Commission.
Great, thank you for the presentation, Mr. Eldridge. Do we have any questions? Commissioner Cohen.
Couple questions. Thank you so much for the report and all the diligence on this. Just a general question. Is there a difference, like with car insurance, you can get liability insurance and vessel insurance? Are we talking about getting both? Are we talking about requiring only liability? Or I'm not sure how that works.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Cohen. In April, when I introduced a sample policy and some of the provisions of different harbors, there is a possibility to get whole insurance and protection indemnity and liability insurance. Some vessels have both. Some policies you're able to get just liability insurance. And for us, I think the most single important is having the liability insurance.
Okay, that's what I assumed, but I just wasn't sure how all that worked. So, so what we're looking for is liability insurance. Would there be a mechanism for self-insured, for someone to be self-insured? Like, you know, in the state of California, I think if you have so much in your bank account, you can say you're self-insured. Is there a mechanism for that we're allowing for people in the harbor?
Yeah, that's another great question. The insurance companies that I had researched and talking to their harbor masters, I'm not aware of that. I know there is a version of a co-op system where a different group of vessels or people can come together and sort of pool resources and get a group plan. But I'm not sure about self-insurance as far as vessel insurance in California.
Okay, might be something to look into. Let's see. I was wondering if there would be a pathway for, you might have some specific boats that would need exemption for whatever reason, they're older, or I don't know. I guess if you're looking for liability insurance, maybe that wouldn't be such an issue, but I know that's been brought to our attention before. I'm wondering if there would be any, if it was brought to Harbor Commission or if it was brought to the Waterfront Director, if there would be any path for an exemption or a longer timeline if someone needed more time. I mean, I just think having some flexibility, I wonder if that's been thought about.
Yeah, that's been a topic of conversation throughout, the many months we've been working on this. And it is a sticking point because at the end of the day, creating a policy that affects all vessels, some of them won't be able to comply because they're older or they're derelict or, the insurance company in their assessment says, this boat is uninsurable. Will that happen? Most likely there will be cases of that. And then the challenge for us is, do we want to craft exemptions for vessels that, are older or derelict and can't comply with this? And quite frankly, that is the issue with a lot of the boats that end up going on the beach in Anchorage, in the mooring area. So for us, from a staff point of view, from a city point of view, I know that, Councilor Doimus is here as well. He might be able to respond to that from a legal point of view in the policy. But the challenge is, would we exempt vessels that we're trying to basically bring into compliance? And is that going to be a self-defeating policy? And we've gone back and forth on that too. It's something that we have considered, we talked to, and it's important, I think, in the results we've looked at the public in the vessel survey that we put out earlier this year. One of the questions asked was, is this a policy, if we drafted it, should it only apply to vessels in Anchorage? Should it only apply to vessels in the harbor? Should it only apply to certain groups, or should it apply to every vessel that's in the harbor district? And majority of the public said it should apply to every vessel in the harbor district as well.
Is that like?
Well, if I may answer that too in the question, I think you had some excellent questions, Commissioner Cohen. First, in terms of the policy, you want to have something that is very clear-cut and fair and equitable across the board. So creating exemptions does create problems, and it's also kind of a double-edged sword because all we're asking for is liability insurance. We're not asking, look, if you're going to have your own boat and damage it, that's on your own. That's not so much of our concern. That's not so much of the public policy concern. The public policy concern here is that the city is self-insured. And so if there's an environmental issue or something else that exposes the city, where the city and the taxpayers have to take such a responsibility, it costs money. So we're just asking for liability insurance. And to that point, generally sometimes, again, you want to have it even across the board. You don't want to cause more of a liability for older boats, have them have a higher rate of 700,000, but you definitely don't want to create an exemption because chances are it's those older boats or something else that may cause this spillages and all that. So that's why we have this policy where it's just kind of cut and dry, equal. It's a requirement across the board, and it doesn't create sticky messes or situations of, if you're favoring a certain group or certain anything else. It's just an automatic requirement across the board. And like I said, there's pros and cons. And for example, like I said, an older boat may actually cause a greater risk because of potentially of environmental issues.
I understand that. I mean, I just, having been through these processes before, I assume that there are going to be people that are going to resist this. And that is going to come to us and come to council and come wherever it might be. And so right now we're in a situation where there is no insurance requirement. And I agree, that is a terrible situation for us to be in, and we want to make that better. But I'm just wondering if we want to consider a pathway so that we can get into at least a better place. And understanding what you're saying, that it should be fair and equitable and everyone should have the same types of requirements upon them. So I understand where you're coming from on that. One other question, I'll go back to the question that the gentleman had at the beginning of our meeting, and I forget, I'm sorry, I didn't write down his name, but is this 500,000 minimum, that does seem like a lot for, I mean, you'd have to take out a lot of the harbor to do that much damage, but, that's possible. But I'm just wondering if there has been a thought to lowering that or where that number came from.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Cohen, again. 500,000 in my research is industry standard in California. Some marinas do require 300,000, so that number did not come out of nowhere. So if you do a survey, if you look at one of the attachments, I think in April, that we had in a marina survey, some marinas do have 300,000, but most have 500,000.
Okay. And then one more question. When you're looking at this 30-day a deadline and the penalty here is slip termination, which I assume would come to the Harbor Commission. So we kind of get into that whole situation where it's very difficult because slips are obviously have a lot of value at this time to terminate. I'm just wondering if there has been any talk of putting in another means or another way to enforce this. We've talked about that in the past. If the only enforcement is to take someone's slip away, it makes it, it's obviously it's a good stick, but it's when sometimes someone just needs a little bit more time. And if we're just saying 30 days and then you lose your slip, that seems like a big penalty. The insurance industry, my home insurance, I live right downtown. They just canceled my insurance policy. I don't live in a high fire area, don't live anywhere. So I understand how difficult it can be for people when they're in those situations to sometimes find insurance, and 30 days doesn't seem like a very long runway.
Yeah, Commissioner Cohen, just to speak to that a little bit, the intent here is to give the slip holders up to 2 years notification to get there. The reality is that we need to craft our policy so it is clear and enforceable in a reasonable amount of time. As you all know, when we terminate a slip, we are far more generous with how we process that. And so for someone for late payment, for all of these things that are violatable offenses for terminating a slip, the reality is that process takes 6, 12 months. I mean, we do a lot behind the scenes to work with folks to get together. My preference would be not to write that into policy because there are special cases where we would need to enforce a clear and strict policy. But how we enforce that in practice can certainly be flexible.
Would it be to your benefit to put in at least that maybe the waterfront director would have some discretion on those types of situations? I understand having 2 years to implement it. That makes sense. Everyone should be able to get insurance within 2 years. But I can see people also following into the situation I'm in, where all of a sudden either something changes on their boat or the insurance industry changes, and then they're in a predicament where, like it's been pointed out, there is no CAL FIRE that you can go to, which is right now my only option. So as someone who's navigating that situation, I know that, the last thing you would want is to also be, while you're trying to figure it out, be worrying that you're going to lose, an asset and with no time to maybe sell it or to, it's a very stressful situation that I'm navigating right now. If anyone knows where I live, I'm not in a high fire area. I'm right downtown. So.
No, completely understood, Commissioner Cohen. I think we've all have some insurance story at this point in time with the way California's been for the past 3 to 4 years. Our intent is never to terminate somebody's slip without absolute valid reason. But with that said, the intent is also not to have a policy where we leave a number of vessels remaining in the harbor that are uninsured. And so if people have a way to get around a policy and we just sort of okay that, the intent is to have compliance with a policy.
Would 60 days or 90 days be something that maybe would be considered?
I think in any situation that has occurred with a termination, if somebody is actively working on us and coordinating with us, we will work with them to the utmost. And so that is really the intent. But the preference would be to have a policy that if somebody is completely ignoring us, or we want to be able to enforce the cases that we need to enforce. And if somebody is showing good faith, we'll most certainly work with them.
Yeah, and Commissioner Cohen, to interject, another reason why we wanted to involve the city attorney's office is for a situation like this, and they were helpful in adding some language on, if you look at provision number 4, at the end of that sentence where it says, required to provide upon request of the waterfront director or his designee. And I think that does bake in a little bit of flexibility that Director Wilshire was talking about. If someone was in a situation that you had spoken of, for home insurance, they'd lost their insurance and they were actively working with that, that according to, I think, sort of the advice we were given, that bakes in a little bit of flexibility within that. If we're not requesting it as of right now on this day, if you lost insurance, then that 30-day window, immediately is triggered. I think it does give our department and, the people who are administering the policy that flexibility.
Okay. My feedback would be, just to sum up, I'm sorry I'm taking a lot of time. I would say 2 things. If you could put in some sort of verbiage which would allow people to be self-insured if they have the means to do that, I think that that would be something that some people might take advantage of. And then I would say that I just think it's more digestible for the public if it's a longer period than 30 days. I would suggest 60 or 90, but I hear and understand why the 30 was what you came down to. Thank you.
And just to add on that, 30 days is very standard for all of our termination-related policies. So lack of payment, really anything. So all of our policy kind of hinges around a 30-day timeline. So.
Thank you.
Great.
I have a notice here.
Excuse me. Yeah, we'll need you to public comment if you want to talk about this. Yep, we'll do that in one moment. Yep. Do we have any other questions from the commission?
Yes, I have a couple of questions. I echo a lot of the concerns, maybe of a slightly different variety that Commissioner Cohen has expressed this evening. And one is not to derail the intent, to get compliance, but to consider the unforeseen consequences of launching a policy like this. For example, people that are passing through our harbor that need temporary mooring or temporary anchorage, right? So Commissioner Cohen was talking about one type or several types of exemptions, and I'm adding to that list. Can you share your thoughts on that, and was that discussed in the development of the policy? Because when I read 17.2, it's fairly straightforward, right? If you don't comply, we can impound your boat, for example. So is there any thinking in terms of altering that language in 17.2 or adding language that would consider a set of exemptions?
Yeah, Commissioner Temin, thank you. That was another scenario that we had talked about internally many times and went back and forth with legal counsel as well. And sort of upon their direction, once again, that sort of clause of upon request of the waterfront director, I think it's much more likely we will have someone coming down, transiting from, Northern California for the night, and, they will come, say, we're looking for a slip for 2 nights. Say, do you have vessel insurance? No. Oh, we have a vessel insurance policy, educating about that. And then, next time, if you do come back for an extended period of time, you're going to be requested to show that, noticing them that. We're not going to deny people, berthing because they don't have insurance. And I think in this policy, as is written, gives us that flexibility as well. And what it really is aimed at is for, permanent and long-term vessels that are anchored here, too. So that, that's absolutely a consideration we had. We have a safe harbor. If there's a major disaster storm, people are coming in. We're not going to turn a vessel away if they're fleeing a life-threatening weather event at sea. That's another scenario we talked about, too, So there are, baked into this, once again, that flexibility of upon the request of the waterfront director or his or her designee. And according to the council, they felt that was the flexibility we needed in that, rather than create separate different clauses with different provisions for each individual circumstance.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, it was expressed to me publicly that maybe some discussion or maybe some education for the public is due that says, yes, in development of this policy, we considered unintended consequences in other areas that I wasn't aware of, thanks to Commissioner Cohen and some of your comments. So thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Stedman. Do we have any other questions from the commission? Okay, do we have? Oh,
Maybe
yep.
just clarification. It seems appropriate, by the way, I support the policy as written, but it seems appropriate that we would take action to approve or to send on this policy for implementation
Yes.
tonight. Okay,
Yes, I believe so.
great.
Yep, to move forward. But before we do that, do we have any public comment on this issue? Oh, Mr. Lope, is it?
We have one hand raised, and I don't have a speaker slip for this individual. But we
Yeah, I
do.
came in like a little bit late, I guess, so I wasn't, I have one, a slip, is that what you want?
Great.
We have one hand raised, and we can do the speaker slip now. So this is
Sure.
Jim Hudson.
Welcome, Jim. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, we have, 2 minutes. Thank you.
I've been a slip holder for, I was talking to the lady, I couldn't believe it was like 32 years, something like this. And she was under the impression that I was a liveaboard. I've never been a liveaboard. I came here in the 70s out of college, did some research for the Abalone Association, California State Outlaws, and the Urchin Divers. That research was published and it's been reconfirmed. It shows the growth of the caviar. That's the valuable part of the urchins. But anyway, there's this 15-day notice of to prove vessel operation. It's really caused a lot of angst. That's 15 days notice. And then the way the wording is, by November 16th. And I just opened this today. I mean, snail mail is snail mail. I mean, it's real slow. So here, I just opened this, so I went down. And here's these older people in their 80s, and they do live down there. And they are just very upset. I mean, talk about rays of angst and the insurance thing. I mean, they're just sort of witless or very uncomfortable. So, and then the way this is worded, they could lose their slip, so you might want to look at this. It's already been out. It's dated November 11th, but like I say, I opened it up.
Could you use the microphone so
Oh, I see.
we're recording? It's easier for the audio guys.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's all right.
So anyway, if you could look at this, and I'm willing to stick around and talk to you. I've been in and out of the harbor. I'm going to be 80 this summer, so
Oh, we're at time right now, but if you'd like, you have another 2 minutes.
yeah. So I'd like to show this to you and talk to you afterwards.
Great. Thank you for the comment. Mr. Lopez, do we have any other public comments?
And Chair Stano, just to speak to that, you're welcome to speak with anyone with the waterfront anytime as well. I hold an office hour on Wednesdays myself, so we do have an operability requirement within the harbor. So I'm happy to talk you through how that works.
I guess
We can talk about that offline anytime as well.
Yeah, the officer that took these pictures, see, they took pictures of my boat, and there's a frayed line. There's my kayak, I just covered it. I don't really see what the unseaworthiness is.
Yeah,
mean,
that's
frayed
the-
line, come on.
That's no
And,
problem. The officers
so
have
I'll
a
be
job.
talking
Yeah,
to him,
the officers
of
have a
course,
job.
and
But if
then-
you do ever want to talk to myself or staff, we're super
Yeah.
approachable with a person who writes
Yeah.
these letters. They go out.
And Kathy, the manager from way back, she's my neighbor. We're in a retirement
Yep.
area there, and,
Yeah, happy to discuss it
Okay.
in detail if you need.
Yeah.
Yep.
yeah.
Great, thank you. Do we have a public comment online, I believe?
We do. We have one hand raised.
Sure.
Harrison Hale.
Oh, yep. Sure, Mr. Hill. Yep, go ahead.
Hi, Commission, me again, and I appreciate the back and forth between, I believe it was Commissioner Cohen and city staff on some of the points that I made, and I just wanted to sort of reiterate and elaborate on that one point about that 30-day termination clause in there. And, you know, that is a very serious consequence. The way that it reads right now, it says that after 30 days, the slip permit will be terminated. So there's no, I'd feel more comfortable if that word were may rather than will. And I do appreciate, though, I think it was Mr. Wiltshire mentioning that you do work with the permittees to cure breaches. So that makes me feel more reassured, but you're not willing to put that in writing in this ordinance. And so that is worrisome, I think. And I would feel a lot more comfortable if there was something more like, 90 days. I appreciate that the other timelines to cure a breach are 30 days, and that seems more reasonable. If you're not paying your bills, well, then, that's within your control. The insurance industry is outside of our control, and I know that there is some contract language sometimes where it will say you have 30 days to cure a breach, and if you can't cure it within 30 days, but you're making a due diligence effort to cure it, then you'll be given some amount of time to cure it. And so I think that I would love to see
Mr. Hale, you're at time, but we'll give you another 2 minutes to finish your statement, please. Thanks.
Okay, I'll wrap up. I would like to see something in there that, because I could see a situation where someone buys a boat and a slip, the city gets their $25,000, transfer fee, and then 30 days you've been trying to get insurance and you can't get insurance, and 30 days later you gotta your slip is being terminated. So I understand that you if I'm working with the city department to show that I'm trying to get insurance, then you'll tend to grant some leniency, but I sure would feel more comfortable if there was something in there like a 90-day timeline to cure for this particular situation. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Hale. We appreciate it. Mr. Lopez, do we have any other public comments in the queue?
There are no other hands raised and no more speaker slips, Chair Stanwyck.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I guess my thoughts on this, when I first joined the Harbor Commission about 4 years ago, and people came up to me and talked to me about things that they wanted to change or things they wanted to implement, and the one common thing that I would say almost everybody came to me about was vessel insurance. And most of them were actually surprised that we didn't have this in Santa Barbara. And I think it's because most of the people who are boat owners, they're the ones who see what goes on in the harbor. The liveaboards, me personally, I've seen boats hit other boats several times. And, the people who are paying to be slip owners need to be aware that these boats that are coming in, there's negligence there. And if we are paying, then why should we have to deal with a visiting boat's negligence in the harbor? Further, I was kind of curious on myself about liability insurance. I called my insurer today because I know that there is the issue with people getting insurance. There are certain boats, concrete hull, older boats, that do have problems getting insurance. And I was kind of curious due to the liability. And what I've noticed is that liability is extremely inexpensive. I asked how much would it be for me to go from a $300,000 to a $500,000, and the answer was $7. So it's not a lot in that perspective. I also look at this kind of in the same way. A few years ago, how parking was an issue in the harbor lot. We had the issue of these derelict large vans that took up the entire back row of the harbor. There was weeds growing underneath them, and people were wondering, why haven't we cleaned this up? And we looked into this, we drafted policy, legislation passed. We had a work group, which I think, John, you're a part of, so thank you for that. And we don't have that anymore. It's now a resource that can be used by others, and it's in the use that we intended it to be. And so, there's these things I feel like that we can change, that we see, and that is a good success story, I feel like, and insurance is kind of related to that one. And also with this, I feel like ultimately it's a matter of time, not when, or not if, but when this actually happens. When there's gonna be a huge spill or a fire that happens. We've seen this in San Clemente, we've seen this in Santa Cruz, and a whole bunch of boats are destroyed. And then insurance comes into play. And once this eventually happens in Santa Barbara, people are gonna start pointing fingers and say, why did this policy not be in place? Why don't we have vessel insurance here? And here we are. We have the ability, the Waterfront did a great job drafting a policy, and here we are to discuss it. And I think it's a good policy as someone who's had a boat and is a liveaboard in the harbor, and I think it's a responsible thing to do. So, yeah, I'm in support of the policy. So,
Just one more question.
Commissioner Cohen.
One more question, I apologize. I know that there was a survey that was given to the all of the slip holders. But I'm wondering if there was ever a public forum outside of today's Harbor Commission to discuss this with some of the boats. I'm assuming it's going to be a small amount, but it's going to be a vocal minority that are going to be, have a really hard time with this. So I'm just wondering if there was any sort of public forum that they were notified about.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Cohen. The meeting back in 2022, my understanding was a time when there was a lot of public comment, and this is before my time, in this position too. And so looking back and in that Harbor Commission and some of the notes and some of the letters that were written here too, and how I sort of look at that, and I appreciate Chair Stano's comment. The work beginning this was already done, and the framework was laid, by the time I got into my current position too, and. It's also important to remember this is not a sort of a directive that's coming just from the Waterfront Department that, is sort of bulldozing, public opinion or even the Harbor Commission's wishes. This has what I consider to be broad support from those three main groups. And I think that the incremental progress that was made back then in 2022 and then taking this up again at the meeting we had in April, surveying what Santa Cruz did. They were very generous to share their policy and the time that they rolled it out. All of those times were opportunities for people to come and, the agendas were posted up on the marina gates we have, a week before the meeting, every single time we have a Harbor Commission. And so, yes, we have not gone to specific stakeholders and sought out their feedback in a way that is different from, I think, any of those examples. Part of that is because I think that we're there, like Chair Stanovic said. I think for me, the question is not whether we should have a policy. It's refining the fine points of how we can encapsulate something that protects boaters, protects the financial and environmental assets of our waterfront and our harbor, and does something to get a policy in place now that has 1 year to 2 year in this policy, which I think is a very generous and wide runway to allow boat owners to get into compliance, either to get insurance for a boat. There are other options. They could sell the boat they have and buy another boat if they weren't able to get insurance of that current vessel. We're not in the business of directing people and telling them what to do. And
No.
I think it's important for us now at this point, I feel strongly to try to get this over the finish line. And,
I appreciate that. I assume if it looks like the date on this to be adopted is January 1st. So is this then slated to go to City Council in between now and then, or I don't know who adopts this, or if this is just an administrative?
No, there would be a number of additional touch points. This would be an ordinance, so we would have to go through ordinance committee, come back to Harbor Commission to evaluate that policy itself, the physical policy and ordinance changes, go to
Okay.
ordinance committee, and then ultimately to city council.
And if this is, I didn't even know this was an actionable item, but it sounds like it is. If there is approval here, then I assume if it goes to ordinance committee and then it could come back to us to look at any of these issues if there were concern. And I assume at some point, the public would be aware of that this was, I don't know at what point you would be sending out some sort of letter to everyone in the harbor to let them know that this date is approaching. Is that
Yeah,
sooner
no,
or
that's,
later?
it's a really good question. I mean, just like with any other policy that we go through, I mean, we've been at this for 2.5, 3 years now. So we really try not to specifically target individuals. We have a pretty robust process for publicly noticing things. We really try to not do things in one meeting at a given time. I think this is the 3rd or 4th time we've met on it. There's going to be 3 or 4 more meetings that are noticed as we do all of the policy that we run through. So I wouldn't consider that this is rushed. This would be a touch point. So if Harbor Commission approves now, like Mr. Aldridge said, we're there. We're not blazing a trail here by any means. I mean, as of 6 months ago, of 30 harbors in California, there were 4 that didn't require insurance. I think that's now down to 2 or 3. So unfortunately, we're becoming somewhat of a haven for uninsured vessels, because I don't think that's necessarily a consequence that we want in Santa Barbara. So we were there. What we're really looking forward for here tonight from you all is that implementation timeline. So we've suggested 1 year for the vessels in the anchorage and mooring fields and 2 years for all other vessels and slip holders. So our question to the Harbor Commission tonight is that reasonable? Do you want to see that longer, shorter? Are you okay with the timeline that we have proposed? And so once we get that answer, then we can start going through that process and noticing the public.
I hear you, and that's good to know if that's what you're looking for. I guess my thoughts are, would everyone in the harbor get a letter January 1st that this is happening if this was approved today? Or are they going to, get that a year from now after it goes through the ordinance committee or it goes to city council? Because that can be a really long timeline. So I like the idea of having, this is the date we're working towards. I'm just wondering if that's going to look like 2 years to people, or if by the time it gets through everything and they get notified, it's going to look more like 1 year or 6 months even. I could see that happening.
Yeah.
So if you can help me understand that piece.
Yeah, no, I think we want to message and notice this as broadly as possible. So the tools we have at our disposal are our Docklines newsletter. We can send direct mailers to individual slip holders. We can email them. We can post notices on the gates. There's only so many ways we can get in touch with people. If they want to be contacted and want to involve themselves in this, they usually do. If they don't, then it's harder for us to reach them. But I think a good step forward is after this, we would gladly post, message, get out to slip holders what Harbor Commission's determination is. The reality with all of our policy, budget, everything, nothing is final until council approves it.
Sure.
And so we will keep that as like a draft date that we're aiming for, but until council ultimately approves it, it's not official.
But we wouldn't get another chance to refine it if there was feedback that came. I could see the next Harbor Commission meeting, having a lot of vocal voices on this, and us maybe, wanting to, I don't know, not everyone's even here right now. We only have 4 of us, so I at any rate, I hear you.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
In all reality, this is how kind of policy goes. So yes, at some point a decision has to be made, and
I get it.
you all are that deciding authority. And so tonight we're looking for your decision and input so we can move forward. The reality is there are many more public touch points before this would become official policy.
Yeah, thanks. Those are good questions. And I was just wondering how, with those touch points, you said ordinance, would it come back to Harbor Commission and then City Council? Is that kind of the flow of everything? And once City Council does that, and that's the official change of the municipal code. Is that correct?
Yeah, that would be correct. So we would come back to Harbor Commission first. The usual flow of things is to come up with some revised municipal code language and an official policy, bring that back to Harbor Commission for Harbor Commission's recommendation. We would then take that to Ordinance Committee, and then after Ordinance Committee, we would go to Council. And once Council approves it, it would be, once Council approves it, there's then a 30-day waiting period, and then it would be officially implemented.
Great, thanks. Okay, so it's up to us now to kind of comment and discuss or make a motion on the current policy that we have in front of us.
I would just like to make one more comment to reinforce what Commissioner Cohen is saying. We're missing a significant portion of our commission this evening, and I agree with you that some of the people that are not here tonight would certainly have a lot of input on this issue. But like you say, Director Wiltshire, that's the way policy goes, right? We're here tonight, and it's like a recess appointment, I think.
It's ultimately your all's decision to make a motion if you'd like or not.
Can I make a motion and have a note on it? I think we only do like actionable minutes. Is that right? Can I not say, these are my concerns?
I don't know what you're saying.
Yeah. Those are generally captured in the discussion and dialogue, but a motion should be directive to staff of something that we can take with. So it's not overly necessary to have it additional in there, but if you feel that it needs to be clarified in some way, most certainly include what you need to say.
I mean, Mike, I think I've said what my concerns are, which I think that maybe this deadline of 30 days would be longer. I understand and hear that there are a lot of ways for you to make that, extend that. But I've also been in situations where, things get enforced and times and dates get pointed at. And so I would be more comfortable with a time and date that, that we could say, well, that feels right. I don't think I'm the only one in the room that feels that way. But yeah, it sounds like we're going to get another stab at this if there is going to be changes. So I would just say that I would approve it with the thought that this 30-day timeline does seem short. And I would also be interested to hear if there is an option for self-insurance.
Okay.
That's not a motion.
No. Just regarding discussion, though, I think that's a good point, the 30-day deadline. I would be willing to make updates to that 60, 90 days. Curious what the other commissioners think. Or do you think 30 days is fine? Because as it reads, it is a year, 2 years, plus 30 days.
I guess what I'd say is that I just have seen that not only the staff, but the Harbor Commission has been very open to any kinds of specific situations that people have and making exceptions for them. For me, policy should be cut and dried, and then an understanding that we can always consider certain situations, as we have. Even in the short time I've been in the commission, we've made lots of exceptions.
I hear you, but I've also been in situations with organizations and government organizations where if they want to point to that date and enforce on it, you're going to get enforced on. And so I just like to make sure that it's a date or a time. I don't think 60 days is out of, like I say, I'm willing to approve it with that suggestion.
With what suggestion were you referring to?
That they consider having a longer time frame,
Okay.
60 to 90 days. But it sounds like we'll get another stab at it.
I believe so.
So that speaks to the implementation that you're talking about, right? I mean, adding 30 days.
No, if that's your recommendation, we can put that into play. The implementation is essentially from today as to when we're going to implement this policy. So that's the year or two timeline. As far as the enforcement piece of requiring
So
insurance.
two different issues.
Correct.
Okay.
Got it. Any other discussion regarding this? Would anybody like to entertain a motion?
Sure. I'd like to move that we implement the vessel insurance policy as presented and the implementation timeline.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? I will second that. Okay, Mr. Lopez, can you please read the motion?
Yes, this is a motion by Vice Chair Ford, seconded by Chair Stanowick, to implement the vessel insurance policy as recommended, with the recommended implementation timeline.
Great, thank you. Before we vote on that, would anybody like to speak towards that motion? I guess I'll speak on that. I'll just say that I think this is a good policy. I agree with the implementation timeline. Knowing that this is going to go to ordinance, coming back to us gives me confidence that we could modify this going forward with the full commission for any of the smaller details. But I think right now, what the Waterfront was looking for is looking for the timeline. And I think I agree with that. Any other comments towards the motion?
I will vote for the motion, but I do hope that those recommendations are noted in the minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, if we don't have any other comments, Mr. Lopez, can you please do a roll call vote?
Commissioner Cohen?
Yes.
Commissioner Ford?
Yes?
Commissioners McCray and Nelson are absent. Commissioner Stedman?
Aye.
Commissioner Anderson is absent. Chair Stanowick?
Yes.
And that motion passes unanimously with Commissioners McCray, Nelson, and Anderson absent.
Great, thank you. Okay, we can move on to the department update. We now have the director's report.
All right, Commissioner Stanowick, Harbor Commissioners, Mike Wiltshire, Waterfront Director. On to some fun stuff. My portion should be pretty brief tonight. I just have an update on a couple items. You could just hit it, yeah. So first off, some good news. So as you all know, we've been working for quite some time with the commercial fishermen of Santa Barbara on their efforts to identify space for the development of what they refer to as an ocean collective, communal space for storage that will serve the commercial fishing industry. So very recently, CFSB, Commercial Fishermen of Santa Barbara, applied for a $250,000 in grant funding from the Uplift Central Coast Catalyst Grant. So this grant was originally funded by the California Jobs First program. They gave Uplift Central Coast $9 million to issue out to local agencies for grant opportunities in the Central Coast region. So CFSB's initial letter of interest was accepted on November 1st, which is great news. So that really provides them with an invitation to submit a full application for grant funds. Over the past couple weeks, we've been working with CFSB, both Kim Selko and Chris Voss, to strengthen their grant application, really to show the support and commitment of the city. So we've developed an MOU, Memo of Understanding, between CFSB and the City of Santa Barbara. So the MOU really outlines kind of our terms and pledges the support from the Waterfront Department if those grant funds are awarded. So this MOU will go to Council on December 10th for their ultimate approval. And so really these funds will help CFSB in furthering their efforts to identify and develop property. They're currently working with Santa Barbara City College. I think that's going very well. At the bottom of the screen here is a link to CFSB's website with more information about their Ocean Collective project. But we just really wanted to take this time to update you all because it was on fairly short order that we are providing city and waterfront support formally through an MOU that'll be reviewed by council on December 10th. So that was all I had on that item. Any questions on this one specifically before I move on to the next topic? more of a good news update than anything. All right, so it's that time of year. This is our last Harbor Commission meeting of the year of 2024. So as we did last year, we're planning on doing a Harbor Commission priority workshop at the start of next year. So staff is proposing a date of January 14th, 2025 at 4 p.m. in the Waterfront classroom. This will be an open public meeting, so it'll be a workshop style format, so a little bit more informal. And we're going to utilize the interactive Mentimeter polling software again that has worked well the last couple of years to kind of garner input from the Harbor Commission efficiently. Next slide. So really some of the objectives of this prioritization workshop, it stands alone from our kind of regular conventional meetings. So it's a chance for us to review the Harbor Commission charter, or the charter, and Harbor Commission's charge. Really recap everything we did in 2024. It was a busy year, so a good chance to kind of look back at all of the stuff that we did. And then really, which is the most important part of it, and certainly helpful to staff, is review and prioritize topics for 2025. And really kind of provide a slightly more informal space where all Harbor Commissioners can weigh in and provide input. Next slide. I'm not going to go through all this, but kind of a sneak peek of some highlights from 2024. Some of the big ones. So finalizing the cruise ship program improvements, Harbor Patrol changes, dealing with Senate Bill 2 and everything that came down from that. We did complete our 5-year review of leases. We reviewed and approved the FY25 budget. We did handle some, at least one slip termination appeal. And we made some progress on our anchorage and mooring field. So some of these will be outstanding items that will most certainly carry into 2025. Next slide. And on my last slide, here's some possible meeting topics for 2025. So this may not be an exhaustive list, but these are the kind of topics that we'll be expecting Harbor Commission to prioritize and rank at the January 14th prioritization. So some of the big ones will be finalizing vessel insurance policy. So as you know, a lot of work's gone into this, and so even as of today, we're making progress. Mooring and anchorage policy. So there's been a few discussions about this and a little bit of pressure from our Public Works Department to kind of deal with the summer anchorage area. And so I think we have some pretty good ideas there. We just need to go through the policy portion of it. Commercial fishing policy updates. We've been working on this for years, so it seems like there's a desire to revisit and improve the commercial fishing policy. And at Waterfront Strategic Master Plan, so this has been talked about for kind of years as well, and so just getting your guys' input on where some of these larger topics stack up, knowing that in any given year we really only have the bandwidth to handle kind of 2, maybe 3 of these big policy efforts. So the plan's on January 14th to fully evaluate all of these. So, and I ask Harbor Commissioners, and I'll follow up with an email, send me any additional priority topics, or if there's anything that you think I've missed, I'll send this list out as well, or a draft list of the large policy items that we're hoping for your input to prioritize. And if there's anything else on that list, we can include it for kind of ranking and prioritization as well. So I'll send out that email next week or prior to the January 14th meeting. Thank you. That's it for me. Any questions before I pass it over to Brian Adair for facilities report?
Doesn't look like any questions, but no, thank you for scheduling the priority setting workshop. I know that's always been really well received by the commissioners. It's less of a formal meeting, gives us some time to brainstorm some ideas. It is open to the public. It is an official meeting. But I know it's always been very helpful to kind of set the groundwork for the year going forward. So I'm glad that we have a date for that. So thanks.
Have we had anybody from the public ever attend?
I don't think that one.
But they are welcome to attend.
Yeah, it's an open public meeting. It'll be in the Waterfront classroom. We'll post it and agendize it as a Brown Act meeting.
Great, thanks. Okay, we can move on to item number 5, the facilities manager report. Welcome, Mr. Adair.
Thank you, Chairman and Harbor Commissioners. My name is Brian Adair, Facilities Manager at the Waterfront. Today I'll be presenting a facilities report. One of the things we accomplished this fall was put a new roof excuse me, putting a new roof on the Breakwater restaurant, which is on the west side of the harbor, next to the Maritime Museum, what we call the Waterfront Center. This roof was 28 years old, and it was due for a new roof. We went out to bid, and Channel Islands Roofing was the lowest bidder, and the total project cost was $51,000. This is a typical shingle roof. It has a 25-year warranty. It was completed in November. Next project that we did this past fall was out on the Stearns Wharf. We have what we call the personal loading ramp hoist, and it was in dire need for getting the rust off of it and getting it primed and painted. This hoist supports the Little Toot water taxi, celebration cruises, and also a parasailing boat, so passengers load and unload at this location. We went out to bid, and New Generation Painting was the lowest bidder and was given a contract PO for $17,000, and this work was completed in October. Next project we tackled was on Harbor Patrol Boat number 2, rescue boat and fireboat. We replaced the fire pump and the fire pump drive motor. The fire pump itself was original from 1985. The motor that drives it was 1995. So that pump was over 39 years old, and it was well past its life cycle. Marine Services was the lowest bidder, and the contract was $104,000. This was for a package for the motor, pump, and controls. The work was completed in November. Here's the new motor and pump sitting on a wooden pallet before we installed it, and the red portion is the gearbox and the pump. The picture on the left is the old motor and pump. In the center is the cavity where that pump is placed, and the photo on the right is squeezing that big package into a small box. And everyone worked hard to get that to be successful. And Harbor Patrol is grateful that they have new equipment that they can more depend on. As far as getting ready for winter storms, we vacated Ledbetter Beach. We give permits for Hobie Cats to be out there during the summer season, but they have to be off by November 1st. We also construct seasonal sand berms to protect vital areas. We went out to bid, and James C. Construction was the lowest bidder and got the contract. For the construction itself is $58,000. The work was completed in November. Now, this is a simple diagram that shows the location of one sand berm that's between Mission Creek Outlet and Stearns Wharf. This helps to divert Mission Creek away from Stearns Wharf. If it did have an outflow underneath the Stearns Wharf, it would undermine it and damage it and prevent its use from the public. The other sand berm is on Ledbetter Beach. This year, we wanted to put more of our effort of sand berm protection along what we call the Harbor West parking lot. We have some sand berm to protect the yacht club, but also we wanted to this year to add a sand berm in front of the Shoreline Cafe. Next project that we do is we maintain the Stearns Wharf and make sure it's sturdy and strong to withstand the storm events. I have a little clip here. Just want to give credit to the divers that work under the water. We do have other means for cleaning the wood piles to make them accessible to give a visual inspection of them, as well as a strength test. This pile cleaning is a lot of work, and every year we inspect about 850 piles per year out of 2,455 that we have. As a footnote, during the heavy storm of 2023, our fail rate was only 0.45%. And I just want to give a hooray to the crew that really do a good job to keep that wharf in good standing. Here's a picture of us. There are certain wood piles that are underneath the wood buildings above, and we can't replace those piles without some really strong creativity. So what we do to prolong their life is that once we identify a pile that's weak and rotten, we put these jackets on it. So we take a fiberglass wrap that around the pile. Then the cavity between the old pile and this wrap, we fill it with grout, and that strength, it's an epoxy grout, so it strengthens the pile and extends its life. So this fall, we identified some of those piles, and we jacketed 7 of them. The next preparation we do for winter is to remove the swim buoys and seasonal anchorage buoys. And then as we pull them out of the water, we clean them and repair them and put them away and get them ready for next year. Another action that we do every year is we install what we call a trap line. It's a rope from the Stearns Wharf over to East Beach. If there are any boats that drag or lose power, this will help hold them back long enough for us to figure out a way to get them away from the wharf, so it protects the wharf in those situations. We also do stormwater flooding and water intrusion avoidance. We stock up on sandbags. We distribute them around the waterfront and Stearns Wharf to help protect the buildings and the retail stores. We clean up storm drains and install filters so that whatever storm water does go into the storm drains, we filter it before it goes into the harbor. We inspect and seal the roofs, clean rain gutters, downspouts, open up storm drain outlets on the beach so the water can flow freely, it doesn't flood upstream. Another action item that we do every year is we trim all the trees in the waterfront. This removes the dead palm fronds and thins out the trees so that in heavy winds the trees don't blow down or the palm fronds don't fall and hit someone on the head. Also, it reduces the cleanup effort, which shortens that turnaround time. We also inspect the docks for any necessary repairs. This is a topography, this is a map of the harbor from April 2024. Every year we map the harbor and see what the depth is. This is just a sample of what was from last year. But currently the federal channel is in good standing. Today I did notice that the sand berm is naturally growing, encroaching into the federal channel. But we feel confident it's in good standing. We haven't had any storms currently to start filling it in rapidly. So we're projecting that the Army Corps of Engineers will be back in January to do their winter cycle dredge cycle. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Adair. Any questions? Commissioner Cohn?
Yeah, just a question on the pilings. I'm just wondering, do they ever put in steel pilings? Are they always wood pilings? I mean, I've seen piers that have been with steel, and I'm just wondering what the reason is other than cost.
So on the Stearns Wharf, we do have a combination of wood and steel pilings. Under Harbor Restaurant, Moby Dick's Restaurant, and Sea Center, those are all steel piles because they have a concrete pad that those buildings sit on, and we just can't get to them. So somebody paid the money for the steel pilings. So those don't typically get replaced. I've been here for 4 years. We've never replaced a steel piling. If we choose to replace a wood piling with a steel, that's an option, but none that I know of currently. In the inner harbor, we use sometimes concrete piles, drive concrete piles as an option.
Vice Chair Ford?
Thanks. I'm just wondering, in terms of the winter preparations that you showed us, are any of them new or modified as a result of sort of the mess and flooding from last year?
The biggest example is putting more attention on the sandberm location where we think it's mostly needed. Ledbetter Beach has been eroded heavily the last 2 winters. And so we're very vulnerable on that West Harbor parking lot. So that's where we decided to focus our resources and try to protect that from being undermined. We also installed a rock revetment 2 years ago. So that's going to protect that parking lot by the yacht club area and maintenance.
Thanks. And also too, Mr. Adair, thanks for that cool video regarding the divers. That's always kind of neat to see the work that they're doing.
Yes.
Also too, a few years ago we had the channel kind of fill with sand and some of those businesses weren't able to operate because of the dredge. Is there just kind of curious, if there's like a contingency plan or something in case there's an early storm this year in December, just how quickly the dredge could get here, or just so there's some kind of emergency plan in case something like that happens earlier than we expect this year?
The Corps of Engineers, as well as Pacific Dredge, they know if we get sanded in, if we get closed in, that they would be here very quickly. I think the last time they were here within a week. So, and also it took them longer because they were in the middle of a 3-year contract and their dredge pipes weren't stretched across Mission Creek and down East Beach, but it's all kind of in place and we can respond quickly. But they're ready to go and they know that we depend on them. But right now the channel looks pretty good. Yeah.
Great, that's good to know.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Adair. Okay, we move on to item number 6, the business services report.
Good evening, Chair Stanwyck, commissioners, members of the public. My name is Cesar Barrios. I am the business manager with the Waterfront Department. And today, as part of my business services report, I bring to you a brief presentation updating you on the arrival of the Stearns Wharf Christmas tree, our 2025 Waterfront Parking Permit, as well as an update on the upcoming fiscal year 2026 and 2027 budget process timeline. With that, I move to my report on the Christmas tree. And so for the 15th consecutive year, the Waterfront Department is working with the Stearns Wharf Association to bring a 25-foot tall white fir Christmas tree to the shore wharf finger, which is right next to the sea center of the wharf. The Stearns Wharf Association has been kindly enough to cover the entire cost of this tree, which is just under $7,000. The tree farm that it comes from is called the Oliver Holt Christmas Trees, and it's located in Northern California. They will deliver the tree on December the 3rd, and the Waterfront Department staff facilities will be in charge of decorating the tree, lighting, adding decorations, lighting, and making sure it's secure at its location. And then on the day of the parade of lights on December 8th, we'll have the official tree lighting ceremony right before the parade begins, as we do every year. Normally we have the public and then some city dignitaries, as well as many of you that attend. And then the tree will be on display through the first week of January. So I encourage the public, everyone that's listening, to come down to the wharf. It's such a beautiful sight. You see the backdrop of Santa Barbara as the shore wharf finger faces the city. So I highly encourage everyone to come down once the tree is ready and decorated down to the wharf. Okay, so moving on to a waterfront parking permit. So here you have the 2025 annual waterfront parking permit, and they go on sale on December 1st of this year, as we do every year. So this permit is valid from the date of purchase through December 31st of 2025. So if someone buys a permit this December, they'll get 13 months of very economical parking along the waterfront. For those not familiar with this permit, it is valid at all waterfront lots from the Ledbetter lot all the way to the Cabrillo parking lots, they're adjacent to the Cabrillo Pavilion. And also includes the Chase Palm Park parking lot by the skate park and the parking lot right across the street, which is a Garden Street lot where the visitor center is located. And then they continue to be a pretty good deal. So this year's design, as you can see here, was selected by the public. So for the first time, our parking supervisor, Nicole Tellis, had a poll on social media asking the public to provide ideas on what designs to illustrate on the permit. And we have several ideas. We have pelicans, sharks, sea lions, you name it. And then the most popular was a whale. So this year we have a humpback whale feature in our parking permit. Yes, very great way to interact with the public on coming up with the design. So we're looking forward to continuing to do this in the coming years. And so here you have a breakdown of how these permits can be purchased. So here you have the general parking permit, which is available to everybody. So they can be purchased in person or online. In person, you can purchase this permit at the harbor master's office just during business hours. The general parking permits will cost $145, and as I mentioned, they're valid from the date of purchase through December of 2025. So when you purchase this permit online, there are two delivery options. You can select the will call or the mail. When selecting will call, the permit will be ready for pickup generally within the next 24 hours at the business office. Just come up to purchase your permit, come out to the front counter, and generally it's ready to go. For those who prefer the mail option, following the purchase, the permit will be processed and mailed within 24 hours, and generally takes about 3 to 5 business days when it's mailed within the county of Santa Barbara. Also, it's worth noting that as soon as someone buys a permit, either selecting the option to mail it in or will call, they can print a temporary parking pass. So that gives some flexibility. So they want to allow for some time for it to be delivered to their place, or allowing for time to go and pick it up at the office. So there are many options available that make it easier for the public to get their permits. And then we have the slip permittee parking permit, which also cost $145, and they're valid during the same dates as the general permit. The difference with this permit, it can only be purchased in person at the harbor master's office during business hours, and as many of our slip permittees know, the reason for this, for the general public to know, is we have to vet that they actually are slip permittees, so they need to be purchased in person. And primarily, the main difference between these two permits is that the slip permittee permit, besides being a different color, which is blue, allows permittees to keep their vehicle in the harbor main parking lot for up to 30 days consecutively without having to move it, which is a perk for those who have a boat in the harbor and occasionally recreate and leave the harbor for more than the 72 hours, which is the general guidelines for the red permit and the max parking. Okay, switching gears a little bit here. So on to the upcoming budget process. And I presented this slide to you a few months ago with just minor updates. So the Waterfront Department and the city at large have started the 2-year budget process for fiscal years 2026 and 2027, as shown in this timeline between the months of February and June. This process will include several meetings with the Harbor Commission, as well as the budget work group, the city's finance committee, as well as city council. We expect to have a budget introduction to present the budget and have an introduction to the Harbor Commission in April of 2025 to discuss any potential fee adjustments and to overall discuss the budget in an effort to have a well-balanced budget by the adopting date in June when it goes back to City Council. So in general, just to make note of this during the entire process, the waterfront will be actively monitoring the revenues, expenditures, looking at our reserve in order to ensure that we achieve a balanced budget by the adoption date, which I mentioned is in June. And we'll ensure to keep you as well as the budget work group well informed of this process. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Mr. Barrios. Any questions? All right, no questions. Just looking forward to the budget work group meeting in February and March, so thanks. Okay, we move on to item number 7, the Harbor Operations Report.
Good evening, Chair Stanwyck, Harbor Commissioners, and members of the public. Once again, I'm Harbor Operations Manager Nathan Aldridge, and tonight's Harbor Operations Report will be on our annual Parade of Lights. We're about 2.5 weeks away from this year's event, which will occur on Sunday, December 8th, with the theme of Yuletide Pirates. So for the itinerary, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we'll have a winter wonderland on the city pier with approximately 10 tons of snow that'll get dumped there, photos for Santa and Mrs. Claus. About a half an hour later, we'll have a human-powered craft parade that will paddle around the harbor all the way along main channel out to Stearns Wharf. And approximately 5 o'clock, the holiday tree on Stearns Wharf will be lit with Dos Pueblos High School Jazz Choir performing. And around 5:30, the boat parade will begin, followed by a 10-minute fireworks display. The main channel will close approximately 6:30 or so, with the fireworks beginning around 6:45 or 7 o'clock. So there will be prizes for best decorations as we do every year. This year's theme of the Yuletide Pirates. And as a reminder for the public, boat categories are human-powered crafts, so that stand-up paddleboards, kayaks, etc., power boats, sailboats, and then commercial fishing boats, and then commercial other. And Mr. Barrios talked about the holiday tree and the lighting ceremony on Stearns Wharf. It's a real special time right there at the end where he referenced the shoreward finger, which is just north of the Sea Center. And the finish of the boat parade and the dredging will be inside the harbor at Moby Dick's recently renovated Oyster Bar patio, like last year. And the parade route on the left up on your screen for the human power parade, starting next to where the city pier is, going through that main channel area, around the seaward finger of Stearns Wharf, kind of ending in front of Mission Creek there, and then heading back in the harbor before dark. And the boat parade beginning approximately 5:30. Vessels will be staging in a circular motion outside of the yacht club, and continuing down the coast, following the flashing lights, turning inside where the mooring area is, paralleling the coast, coming up alongside Stearns Wharf, and then unlike where this graphic shows where there's a finish at the end of the wharf, the vessels will continue around the finger of the wharf to the inside of the channel where they'll be judged by the patio at Moby Dick's. And that is the end of my harbor operations report this evening. Hope to see you all there on December 8th to celebrate another great year, and we're planning for some good weather.
Thanks, Mr. Aldridge. Any questions? I do have one question. I noticed the firework display is 10 minutes this year. Was that an increase, or what went into that? That's going to be pretty cool. I know that the 4th of July is 20, and we used to have 5, right? And now that'll be pretty cool.
Yeah, Chair Stanwyck, thank you. Generally, Golden State Fireworks has been fairly generous, I think, with their display in the wintertime, and it has always been stated as 5 minutes. They've been kind of creeping into the 7, 8, 9 minutes, and so we decided to round it out to 10 minutes this year.
Awesome. That'll be fun. Great. Thanks. Well, we've come to the end of the agenda. Any staff communications?
Nothing additional on our end.
Great. Any commission communications? Vice Chair Ford.
Just one, congratulations to you for your reappointment as a harbor commissioner. It's great news.
Thank you. Yeah. Hoping this wouldn't be my last meeting. So yeah, glad to be back for another 4 years. So thank you guys.
Yeah, congratulations. To you too, Brian, for 4 years. Didn't realize it went by so fast.
Yeah.
Good job.
All right. Yeah, one thing I just want to say is, regarding commission communications is thank you guys for the awesome seafood festival last month. I know that was one thing that we kind of ended on. Super cool with music and food. I had a great time. Also, next week at this exact time, we'll all be enjoying Thanksgiving dinner. So I know I'm very thankful for just, being in Santa Barbara and the beautiful harbor. Mountains and ocean is pretty unique. So very, very thankful for that. This is the last meeting of the year, but hopefully we can see everybody at the Parade of Lights coming up in a few weeks. And that is really it for the agenda. So do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Meeting adjourned. Thank you all.